Our chief guest this morning, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Keynote speaker, Honorable Nirmala Sitharaman, Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs of the Republic of India. Guest of honor, Honorable Nivad Cabral, State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms. His Excellency Gopal Bagle, High Commissioner for India in Sri Lanka, past chairs of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, distinguished delegates, Board and Secretariat of the Ceylon Chamber, ladies and gentlemen. Aibowan, good morning and welcome to the inaugural session of the Sri Lanka Economic Summit 2020. Your Excellency, President Rajapaksa, the Ceylon Chamber is singularly honored by your participation in the Economic Summit. We look forward to Your Excellency's address later this morning. Our extreme gratitude also goes out to the Honorable Nirmala Sitharaman and Honorable Nivad Cabral for gracing the summit with their esteemed presence and keynote contributions. The 2020 edition of the summit is themed Roadmap for Takeoff, driving a people-centric economic revival. The Chamber stands honored that the summit has brought together a galaxy of policymakers, experts, business leaders, and international thought leaders to deliberate on the short-run takeoff and accelerated growth thereafter of the Sri Lankan economy. The year 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic have inflicted on our nation and the world at large economic, social, and life impacts of unprecedented proportion. Sri Lanka in particular was on the cusp of a recovery from the Black Swan event of Easter 2019, only to be faced with the COVID-19 crisis. The Chamber has espoused the view that an accelerated post-COVID recovery will be predicated on the effective execution of a public-private shared vision for economic revival and social sustenance, a vision based on three founding principles. First, people centricity, primacy for the protection of life and livelihoods, whereby Sri Lanka's employment, human development, and socioeconomic indicators are secured as an immediate priority. Second, the ambition of a V-shaped takeoff. Third, the need and appetite for exceptional, bold, and innovative measures, which include exceptional stimuli, restraint, and calibration to enable the regeneration of growth. The principles of people centricity and the bold ambition of accelerated takeoff are embodied in the theme for this year's summit. It is our view that the private sector is an equal partner in securing an accelerated economic recovery. Sri Lanka's private sector has been quick to transform, commencing with employment preservation via the adjustment of production and service portfolios, alongside the retraining and redeployment of human capital. Equal focus was directed at re-engineering supply and value chains with primacy for domestic supply ecosystems and the sustenance of SMEs. It is imperative that Sri Lanka's private sector continues to be competitive and agile and continues to expand employment opportunities. The private sector has demonstrated that leading the resurgence, as opposed to hoping for brighter externalities, can deliver transformative results. The Chamber is confident that the private sector will continue to transform ahead of the curve and thereby form a cornerstone of the nation's economic revival. The challenges faced by Sri Lanka, its government, and economy are singularly unprecedented. In this context, we congratulate the government on the management of the economy through these exceptional times. In particular, with respect to the structured approach underlying the country's economic revival framework and the calibration of outflows to inflows, enabling the maintenance of macro stability. A sharp export recovery to levels on par with the previous year stands testimony to the resilience of Sri Lanka's export sectors and the effectiveness of the revival strategies adopted by the government and the private sector. It is emboldening to see the diversification of the export basket, which augurs well for the period ahead. The Chamber is appreciative of the opportunity provided to share its views, both at a macro and national level, as well as at a level of sectoral detail, with the high officers of His Excellency, the President, the Honorable Prime Minister, and the Task Force for Economic Revival and Poverty Alleviation. The first two sessions of the Economic Summit will focus on the external and internal dimensions of post-COVID-19 economic recovery. On the global front, assumptions and expectations continue to be disrupted. Responses of governments, markets, and trading blocs to the multiple waves of the pandemic challenge us with a very volatile external environment. In Sri Lanka's context, the runway for takeoff is by no description a straight line, nor smooth in terrain. Among others, the balancing act between growth and debt will remain a call out for precise navigation. Equally, the synchronization of key policy levers across fiscal, monetary, investment, industrial, and social development spheres will be pivotal in securing stability while achieving accelerated growth. From among the recovery levers, FDI and export will be a pivotal dimension and have been duly prioritized in the budget 2021. While the dynamics of external economic levers remain uncertain, building our own certainty, leveraging internal resources, is a fundamental tenet of accelerated economic revival. The center of gravity therefore shifts towards the competitiveness of domestic industries. And the re-emergence of local commerce will no doubt create opportunity for nations and companies to punch above their weight through the leverage of skills, technologies, and enabling policy environments. This year's Economic Summit includes sessions focused on the upgrading of value add, via a shift towards local resourcing and the leveraging of advanced and inclusive digital technologies. The summit will also discuss the transformation of the agriculture sector, which has rightly received pivotal focus from the government and provides livelihoods for a near 25% of the nation's population. A key parallel outcome will be the revitalization of the village economy as a catalyst of bottom-up stability. While the narrative on food security reshapes global supply chains with a tilt towards domestic sufficiency, Sri Lanka needs to resolve pre-pandemic issues in the agriculture sector, such as transportation and storage, leveraging on smart technologies to boost production and limit wastage. Citizen centricity and digital inclusion will remain in focus across these development levers. Equal emphasis needs to be applied to the external sectors in preparation for the progressive relaxation of travel and trade restrictions. A topic addressed at this year's summit will be the resurgence of tourism within the context of the new normal, with specific focus on the resurgence of livelihoods across the tourism value chain. The transition of the remarkable recovery of the export ecosystem to a sustainable long-run growth gradient remains of overarching importance in order for our economy to reach the cruising altitudes of 7% growth within the next 3 years. Export growth will be predicated on the flow-through of domestic production outcomes to the competitiveness of nations' external-facing manufacturing and service sectors. The protection and refreshing of the inward remittance flow through the diversification of knowledge service exports will also be pivotal in bolstering the growth curve. Today, we stand at an important juncture of our nation's economic and social trajectory. Our concern for our nation's economy are reflective of economic realities accentuated by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. An $84 billion economy pre-COVID, we are likely to close 2020 at around $80 billion US dollars. Our economic growth before and through the COVID-19 period ranks among the lowest in the SAARC region, indicative in absolute and relative terms of the confines of the middle income trap, a condition prevalent over the past several years. We therefore have on one hand the challenge of achieving vertical takeoff from the fulcrum of the COVID-19 downturn, while on the other having to navigate and escape from the middle income trap. Achieving both these while operating within a very tight fiscal space and perfecting the balancing act between growth and debt is a multifaceted challenge that the private sector and public sector needs to embrace together. The Ceylon Chamber has recently completed the post-COVID edition of the Sri Lanka Economic Acceleration Framework, which envisions reaching a growth rate of 7% within the next 3 years, leading to the transformation of the 84 billion US economy in 2019 to a 127.5 billion US dollar economy in 2026. The framework is the output of 17 chamber committees comprising of more than 100 economists, analysts, and sector leaders, and also encompasses without limitation the dimensions of quantitative targets, policy reform, sectoral focus, and governance. The acceleration framework envisions quantum improvements in macro and fiscal indicators, such as the primary balance, budget deficit, and tax revenue as a percentage of GDP. The framework also envisions the uplift of external sector indicators, such as the export-import balance, reserves in months of exports, and FDI and current account balance as a percentage of GDP. In addition to fiscal and external sector indicators, the acceleration framework also defines and envisions holistic resurgence to include an elevated position in terms of human and social development indices, while in parallel achieving a step change in reputational and confidence metrics, such as the Global Competitiveness Index, Ease of Doing Business Index, and the Global Innovation Index. Our view is that at a sectoral level, sustainability calls for a balanced growth overall, with an overweight significance being directed at sectors in focus in the new normal. Sectoral growth will be dependent on the establishment of fundamental enablers such as energy, digital transformation, human capital development, and SME facilitation. A vertical takeoff will require a synchronization of public and private sector inputs. A needle-moving contribution from government will be the application of key policy reform levers. Infrastructure investments will remain foundational. Prevailing fiscal challenges will, however, call for the deployment of innovative and optimized financing mechanisms, including but not limited to public-private partnerships and specialized infrastructure financing instruments. Equally, the private sector will be called upon to elevate its participation from the perspective of investment and risk. Private sector participation should be facilitated via appropriate partnership mechanisms. We believe that the judicious application of the policy levers available to government will deliver disproportionate returns. Efficient and timely execution of mega projects would also move the needle. Productivity and efficiency will be pivotal in converting policy into execution and ultimately in the delivery of growth. Through successive editions of the acceleration framework, the Chamber has stressed the need for policy and reform agendas with respect to trade, labor, public sector and SOEs, capital markets, and targeted welfare, among others. It is very encouraging to see positive movement on several of these dimensions within the policy agenda of the government of Sri Lanka. The role of government and the efficacy of its delivery will be pivotal to the achievement of the vertical takeoff to which we aspire. The battle against COVID has demonstrated the systemized capacity of the government and the public sector. This capacity and potential spans process, systems, and people. Our expectation of government would be to convert this systemized capacity and capability and potential into the delivery of a step change in economic value creation. A parallel call on government would be for a high degree of commitment towards the strengthening of fiscal and monetary disciplines, maintenance of macro stability, and the elevation of sector competitiveness alongside a progressive approach to global market access. Staying the course of fiscal consolidation will be pivotal in maintaining positive sentiments of global rating agencies as well as in motivating foreign direct investments, which together will bolster the sources and cost of capital required to drive growth. We are confident that the government will commit strong focus to the recalibration of public sector expenditure, the empowerment and upskilling of the civil service, SOE reform, and public-private partnerships as modalities of capital mobilization. It is a singular honor that the Honorable Prime Minister of Sri Lanka will flag off the keynote session on empowering takeoff, a discourse centered on efficient government and a re-envisioning of the role of the state-owned enterprises on the fabric of the national economy. We are confident that an efficient and revitalized government machinery, in combined with private sector positivism, can rapidly energize business confidence locally as well as globally among foreign direct investors, in combined setting a fresh trajectory for economic growth in the years ahead. The Chamber's view of a sustainable acceleration framework is a holistic one, spanning the vertical, horizontal, and overarching dimensions of sectoral, enabling, and policy levers. This matrix anchors the Chamber's discourse with government as part and parcel of its ethos of a private-public shared vision for economic acceleration. Through the institution of a network of state ministries, the government has signaled its commitment to a programmatic approach to delivery and performance management. The Chamber's acceleration framework highlights the state ministry structure as a vehicle to capture the upside of granular delivery tracking and pan-ministry harmonization. The future, which frames our economic resurgence, represents an era of exponential change. The rules of global competitiveness will be redefined, opening up a phenomenal opportunity for smaller and agile nations. Three megatrends in particular will have a defining influence on this future. The first megatrend, the fourth industrial revolution, is centered on the democratization and exponential broadening of the affordability and availability of technologies such as cloud, artificial intelligence, robotics, fifth-generation networks, and the Internet of Things. Technology, applied correctly, has the power to bridge asymmetries in opportunity, eliminate disparities in the access to basic human rights, such as information, education, and health, and in accumulation, flatten the rich-poor gradient, a prerequisite for the smooth takeoff of a multifaceted economic revival. These technological advancements will also provide the opportunity for smaller nations to catch up with the legacy dominions, and likewise for single-country businesses to reach out and be globally competitive. Technology advancement with respect to connectivity, digitization, and automation will enable the second megatrend, the power of ecosystems and pervasive globalization. Increasingly, the competitiveness of individuals, businesses, and nations would depend not only on singular strengths, but more on the power and competitiveness of the physical and virtual ecosystems of which they are a part. The future will be one where the large cannot flourish without the small, and it is always more profitable to include rather than exclude. And this leads to the third megatrend, which will guide businesses towards an inclusive and sustainable form of capitalism, stakeholder capitalism as exposed by the World Economic Forum. This thesis negates the contradiction between capital growth motives and social development outcomes, and points to the eminence of a people-centric approach to economic revival. Maintaining this resolute focus on people centricity, it is important to pivot on our fundamental strengths, of which there are many, not least our strategic location and hub potential, resilience, and human development and competitiveness rankings relative to South Asian peers. These strengths should bolster our efforts to enhance our competitiveness and accelerate economic growth. The future of our economy, as well as our nation, will be what we make of it. We are born to a nation blessed with world-class talent. We have in our midst large, medium, and small enterprises who in their own right are global, regional, and domestic champions. We have also collectively weathered many waves of economic, political, and external turmoil and have consistently bounced back through a trajectory of growth. We now enjoy the foundational security of a strong and stable government, as well as strong signals of policy consistency and continuity as espoused in Budget 2021. We may indeed have been bruised by the twin shocks of the Easter 2019 attacks and the COVID-19 pandemic in quick succession. But now we need to capitalize on the twin positives of low interest rates and Budget 2021 growth incentives. The call of the hour is therefore to have no forbearance for despondence. As the engine of growth of the Sri Lankan economy, we need to be resolute in our commitment to remobilize the growth trajectory and to lead the solution, rather than take refuge in being part of the problem. It is for us to achieve takeoff with collective energy and to do so with a singular focus and positivism. I thank you all for your patience and welcome you once again to the Sri Lanka Economic Summit 2020. I wish you a pleasant day. Ayubowan.